Now, something interesting happened that I actually didn't anticipate at all. I did not see it coming, which is that headphones.com, the sponsor of today's video, is actually carrying the Focal Elex now. Not only are they carrying it, but they're carrying it at the lowest price I've ever seen it at. And they asked me to do a video on it. Now, when they initially contacted me, I was thinking, what am I going to possibly say about this that hasn't already been said? But then I realized that the industry has changed so much and the competition has only increased. It's only gotten better. But because of the price drop, that makes it more relevant in more price categories. So instead of actually reviewing this, the concept of today's video is to actually look at this headphone and see if it's actually worth it in 2024. Is it now one of the best headphones under $500? Headphones.com is a very high quality online retailer of headphones like this one, amplifiers, DACs, and speaker equipment. And as of right now, in my opinion, this is the best place and price to purchase the Focal Elex. Headphones.com, thanks for sponsoring today's episode. Now, normally I would say that this is only my thoughts and opinions, but I'm actually happy to be able to do something I don't always get to do. I get to actually go back and look at a lot of other user feedback and kind of conglomerate what the general thoughts on the product are. So a lot of these opinions are not just mine. There are a lot of yours as well. Now, general user feedback for this headphone has actually been largely very positive, especially when it comes to the sound signature. There are benefits to it, there are trade-offs, and there are detriments to it, just like any other headphone. But I think the general response is that a lot of people really like it. And I have to agree with that. It's a generally just really pleasing and enjoyable sound signature to listen to. If you've never heard this, this is somewhat reminiscent of the rest of the Focal line. And I actually think that that's a good way to look at this headphone, is as an entry point into the Focal sound signature. Now, it's not exactly a cheap analog to their new Utopia or anything like that, but it is, again, a good entry point into what you can expect from Focal. Now, rather than going over the sound signature in its entirety, like I would typically do in a full review, I kind of actually just want to do a few comparisons to other really good headphones. Things like DT1990, that's also been out for a very long time. Things like the HC660S2, things like Edition XS. Let's go ahead and talk about all those comparisons and how this stacks up. One of the things that's really noticeable about the sound quality of this headphone is that it's just a very kind of pleasing headphone to listen to. It's a headphone that when you listen to it, it sounds very detailed, it sounds very clear. Everything seems to be relatively high fidelity, and there aren't any massive weak points. The sound staging is pretty good, the bass response is pretty good, the high-end fidelity and timbre is pretty good. I wouldn't say that anything is perfect on this headphone, but everything just sounds pleasing. It sounds nice to listen to, with a little bit of an edge toward detailed and a little bit less of an edge towards a soft, warm sound signature. Now, right away, this makes me want to compare it to things like Edition XS. Compared to that headphone, the XS has, I think, better and wider sound staging, a more defined, more tight imaging in that entire sound staging sector. I think it's just a better overall imaging and sound staging headphone, but there's a trade-off. It's more bright than this headphone is, and it has a less lower mid-range body and less overall bass response. Now, the bass response on here compared to that XS is not the tightest, it's not the cleanest compared to that XS, but I do think that more people will just enjoy the general sonic properties of the bass response. It may not be as high fidelity, but man, it hits a little bit more solidly than that XS does, and I think that more people are going to appreciate the more solidified bass response of this headphone. I also think that while this treble response leans slightly metallic in timbre, the XS is even more so. I do think that this headphone sounds a little bit more colorful, and the timbre coloration is a little bit kind of cleaner and more honest on the Elex than it is on the XS. But this isn't to say that the XS doesn't have benefits of its own. The detail response in the treble is immaculate. The sound staging and imaging, like we talked about, is also very, very good. So I don't see either one kind of really dominating the other here. I think both have their advantages and both have their disadvantages. Okay, versus the Sennheiser HC660 S2. I actually really like the S2. As time goes on, I respect and appreciate that headphone more and more. And this comparison is more difficult than the XS is for me, because both of these headphones are good at very different things. The 660 is a very mid-range focused headphone, and it's also a very neutral headphone, and that's not exactly the same thing that you will get with this headphone. This headphone has a very big sounding mid-range, so it fills your head a lot, but it's not quite as honest as the 660 is. But I don't know if everybody's going to want the honesty of the 660. The 660, when it nails a song, can really sound immaculate, but it will also tell you when a song is not performing very well and not recorded to the best standards. But this headphone is a bit more dramatic when it comes to its reproduction of music. It has more emphasis to certain things that may not be in the 660's wheelhouse, like the overall soundstaging representation. It has a farther out soundstage than the very internal version of the 660. Now, both have their benefits. I think for vocals specifically, the 660 is a masterful headphone. It's very clean, it's very clear, and very tonally accurate in my opinion. This headphone is less accurate there, and probably overall less good in the mid-range, but it's got things like an emphasized bass response that headphone doesn't quite have. And it's also got some slightly different tricks in the treble response that the 660S does not have. And as an overall recommendation, I don't necessarily see a clear winner here again. I see trade-offs. I see how one audience could love one headphone and hate the other, but that works for both sides. Some people will love the Elex and hate the 660. Some people will love the 660 and hate the Elex. That's just how it goes. Now, also regarding that Sennheiser line, if you didn't want to upgrade to another Sennheiser, but you were coming from something like an HC600 or a HC6XX, I still think that this is a good line of succession if you don't want to go all the way up to the Focal Clear. It's a little bit heavier and it's a little bit less comfortable than the 600 series, but it does have a more like tangibly high-end feel to the build quality. And I think that a lot of people will like that aspect of the feeling of it when they upgrade. Now versus DT1990, these are really different headphones. I actually bought that headphone recently again to do the same exact type of video for myself on the DT1990 because I really liked that headphone back in the day. And that's a very studio focused headphone. It has a completely different build methodology. This is more hi-fi home focused. That is more studio focused. It's tougher. It's built more to last. And this is built more to kind of feel premium, to feel and look high end. And the sound signatures are also very different. That headphone is more willing to sound unpleasant if it's being honest with the recording. So that headphone will take a bad recording and kind of make it sound like shit, but it will take a good recording and make it sound great. Whereas this headphone tends to not quite go as far as that. It's more willing to let a lot of things sound very, very good. Now you also have some headphones like the Moondrop Para or the new FT5 from FIO. And those headphones come in about the same price tag, but I don't feel like they are necessarily as competitive as this headphone is at $450. This does feel like a special headphone in this category in the sense that not a lot of headphones are good at what this does. And while nowadays, I think it's hard for any one headphone to dominate under a $500 price tag, I think it is one of the best under $500 headphones currently. It's unique. There's not a lot of headphones that do what it does, and it's competitive. And I think at this price point, that's all you can really ask for. You just have to select what type of headphone you want, what type of sound signature you want, what type of build you want, and how you are preferring to use your headphones. Now, right now, a brand new, very hot headphone is the HD490. And I have a dedicated headphone comparison coming out later this week, early access on Patreon if you want, but it is coming out later this week comparing this headphone to that headphone. Now, even though the user feedback of this headphone for its sound quality has been really good, it's still relevant today for its sound signature. It's a really well-performing headphone overall. It is not without its issues. And there are two major ones that I want to bring up, one of which is actually shortly going to have a fix for it. Issue number one, which is the one that hasn't been resolved yet. Focal has a series of headphones that have a driver pop issue, where if a bass note is played really loudly, it will actually physically pop. You can like hear it popping. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Focal has come out and said that this doesn't actually damage the headphones, but it's pretty unpleasant for users to listen to. And over the years, I've heard probably between about 5 and 10 different Alexas, and you can find the bass popping if you're searching for it or if you're listening really loudly. Like you can actually get your headphones to do it if you try to, but it's louder than I would recommend listening, and it's never at what I would consider reasonable volumes. Now, I'm definitely not defending Focal here for it, but it does go into that thing where if you're kind of babying this headphone, you won't run into this issue. But if you are a user who prefers to listen loud or have to listen loud, you may run into this issue with bassier music. The other issue for this headphone is these pads that it's got on it, which are great for like 6 months, and then they wear down and they don't last very long. The problem hasn't been them not lasting long. It's been the fact that getting replacements has been notoriously a massive pain in the ass. Now, I don't have an exact date, but I did confirm with headphones.com that they have ordered new replacement pads for the Elex from Focal. So they will have them eventually. So they're actually fixing the issue. That was another massive frustration with Drop, was they were the only retailer selling this headphone that had pads that wore down relatively quickly, and yet they would not really offer replacement pads consistently. So I'm hoping that headphones can fix that. The other small issue with this is the comfort, and it's the most common complaint I hear about this, which is a slight hot spot on the top of the headband. This is an issue with all Focal designs. In terms of wear and tear, every headphone has something that will wear down first. And if it's not the pads we're talking about, the actual metal grills here will often kind of, if you throw this in a drawer, if you treat it kind of rough, if you toss it around, the first thing you'll probably notice is either denting or flaking of the paint on these metal black grills on the surrounding. Now, the way to get around both of these major issues, which is actually something I just personally recommend across the board for most electronic devices, is to baby the headphone. I think the reality of the build and Focal as a company is that these are not really tough headphones. That's just the reality of them. You do have to take care of them, and you do have to kind of baby them a little bit. Now, luckily this comes with a big kind of storage case. I would highly recommend putting this back in the storage case anytime you're not using it. I would not throw it in a drawer. I wouldn't leave it out on the desk for other things to bump into, because it just has proven over time not to show wear that well. You know, and this is a $500 device. This is a premium headphone, but you want to take care of it. And I think the way to take care of it is just to baby it a little bit. So the Elex in 2024, is it worth it? If you're getting it under 500 bucks, I'd say sure. I have no qualms, no issues recommending this to people even till today, as long as you're getting it at an acceptable price point. I think paying over 500, you start to get into headphones that are just really, really, really good, especially if you're willing to just jump up a little bit in cost. So I think currently where it sits with the existing market, yeah, I'd say it's totally recommended for me, for the right person, just with the caveat, make sure you take care of it. If you take care of this headphone, it will take care of you. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I want to thank headphones.com again for sponsoring today's episode, and you can find this on their website down below. See you guys next time.